Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a few weeks since we've had a trio talk, and so really excited to be doing it today. How you doing today, Daryl?
I'm doing as well as everyone is right now, Aaron, right? It's been a busy week, a long week, and you're in one of the focus states. I mean, my state was, wrapped up quite some time ago in Washington, but I mean, they'll be counting here for another, 15 days, but the decisions are already made for the most part finished. But
Yeah,
man,
you
you're
would
down in
think.
Nevada.
Yeah, you think, with a city built on numbers that can count probably a million dollar, a million ones really quickly, would be able to count ballots really quickly, but that's not the case. So
They
we're
they
we're
can
we're
count,
still.
but remember,
They,
for us, they can be postmarked on the
that's
day
true.
of and
That's true.
received up
So.
until like 20 days after. It was funny because, and I know we don't want to get too much into this today, but it is part of what we're talking about and what the video will be on today. But, the Secretary of State of Washington, she was on just saying, wouldn't it be nice if all of the states coordinated their timing, right? So ballots
That would be
received
nice.
on, counted by. I mean, some of the logic that hasn't been necessary in the past, I suppose, just because there hasn't been so many mail-in ballots. And our state's been on it. I haven't been to a polling place. I can't remember when. It's probably been a decade, because
Oh,
we've been on
wow. Okay.
you only do mail-in ballots here. There are no in-person polling stations anymore.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so
Yeah.
yeah, that's different for me. This is the first time doing it, so well, that's good to know. Yeah, it would be nice if everybody kind of got together on the same page on some of these
But
things.
anyway,
So
I'm doing good. Yeah.
good, good. Well, like Daryl said, we're going to talk about that today. We have an interview with you and Jeb Mason. You want to kind of
Yeah.
preface that just a little bit, give everybody a little preview?
Yeah, and so for some of you who, well, hopefully a lot of you guys, but some of you didn't listen to this during the summit, but Jeb Mason works for a team in Washington, D.C., and has spent a lot of time on the Hill. And he worked in the Bush administration and Treasury Department during the last financial crisis, and actually was in the room when they were making the decision. Super fascinating stories. When all the New York banks were going down and all that stuff. So Jeb and his team is at a company that just changed their name to Mindset, and Jeb and I go through a discussion about still relevant today. We don't have a declared winner, so on what's going to happen in the housing and housing policy, on either case, during the lame duck session, if there is one, or if the Trump administration continues, or if there's a change in administration to Biden. So, that was the discussion, and Jeb provides some insights. I think, some of it's a little technical, but hopefully it'll make some sense to everybody and add some value.
That's fantastic. So, we just everyone who was joining, who was thinking we were going to talk about the new trio preferred structure and everything like that, we were going to, but obviously we felt this was a little bit more relevant for what's going on right now. Right? There's still some states in the balance trying to figure things out, and this felt a little bit more relevant for what we're going to talk about. Now, that being said, we will talk about that other subject that we did advertise next week. We promise we will do that. Now, before we get
Yeah.
started, I do want to talk about a couple different things. We do have a couple promos coming up. You will see these in emails on Monday and on social media on Monday. These are for agents. So please pay attention to this. We will be shooting this promo and sending this out to you guys on Monday. Some of these have to do with the Trio Ready homes, for those homes that you get on Thursdays, and some of them will be just on traditional sales, or traditional trio sales, I should say. So really exciting. We'll be sending that out, and
Yeah.
think of it as kind of like a holiday sort of gift from Trio, right?
Yeah, and I think I can comment, briefly. One is there'll
Hmm.
be two incentives within that. One will be for, like Aaron mentioned, Trio Ready homes. And what we're trying to do there is that when we have folks in our homes that we know are going to be transitioning to something else, right? They're moving out. We pre-market those, and you probably see those on our weekly Trio Ready homes that are there. And some, we're trying to get them as early as we can. And agents that are out there working with customers, these are great homes for you to know they're move-in ready. People can get right in there. If we've already approved the applicant, it's in their price point, they can go view the home and make a commitment. So what we're doing is running a special, basically a pre-listing special that goes onto those homes. And if you can work with a customer, they're interested in the home and they sign a Trio lease, we're providing a pretty significant bonus. And like Aaron said, that detail will be out shortly. And the idea is to get those homes, for us, occupied as quickly as we can. And for you, since inventory is so short on supply, these are homes that are obviously Trio qualified, right? We already own them. They're in our inventory. So gives you some value to be able to have those before the market sees them, and you can move your customers, market those to your customers and ensure that they're there. For those of you that are doing, marketing on your own, whether it's through, publishing different listings or what have you on different mediums, you can also work with the team to be able to, market these in addition and try and bring some traffic in for yourself. So that's the one subset that we're working on. The other is, like Aaron mentioned, an end of year special that's kind of ahead of what next year's structure that we went over during the summit is going to be about. So we're trying to, help you guys out and us out for year end, drive a few more transactions through and get some more compensation in your pockets for year end. So we'll get those out as quickly as we can.
Yeah, really, really exciting. I think it's going to be really nice for everybody, especially at the end of the year, trying to make your numbers, trying to get a last minute push all the way up to December 31st. And the last thing I want to push on before we go too far is, I've got my little post-it note here, is our survey. If you haven't had a chance to do our survey yet, because we had a ton of people attend the Trio Summit live, we've had a lot more, probably twice as many more, rewatch it later on down the road. And so in these last 2 weeks that it's been available, a lot of you guys have watched it. We want to get your feedback on it. We want to make sure that we're providing you with the content that you need, that you find helpful, and things like that. So take 5 minutes, complete that survey. We will be closing it. We'll be probably in the middle of next week. But so far we've been getting really good feedback. One of the issues that I have seen, though, is that some of the sound issues, and one of them actually had to do, unfortunately, with this video that we're about to watch. So if you're going to watch this video, I would recommend wearing a headset. You're going to definitely get a better sound quality at that point, right? Don't watch it in a noisy room. You're definitely going to want to watch this with a headset, because some of it sounds good, some of the sound kind of goes in and out a little bit. I apologize for that. It was just the way it was recorded. And so
we had some challenges when Jeb and I were on the line together. So yeah, we did our best to patch that in, but very good point. And hey, we forgot to mention, Aaron, that we didn't just diss Patrick. He's actually in a flight today, so we missed him, and that's also part of the reason why we wanted to make sure that he was involved in the release of the promotion. So
absolutely, yeah. So he will be back with us next week. And so, folks, I am having internet issues, so I'm going to go ahead and launch this as soon as I can so that it can be seen. If it doesn't get seen, I will go ahead and drop it in the Facebook group so everybody can see it no matter what. So I apologize. We seem to be having technical issues. They're not connected in any sort of way either. So all right. Well, Daryl, thank you so much.
All right.
I'm going to go ahead and launch this. Yeah. Thanks so much, everybody. Here we go.
Today at the Trio Summit. I'm so fortunate, and so are you, that we've got Jeb Mason with us today. And Jeb is with Mindset, and formerly Cypress Group, and has been working. Jeb, I think we met, I don't know how many years ago now it's been, but it was back during the crisis, the last crisis that we had, right?
That's right. It's a deja vu all over again, right?
Well, fortunately, a different one in terms of housing, but rough for the rest of the country, right? Rest of the impacts. But no, so Jeb's here today. Jeb does a lot of policy work in DC for various interests in housing, outside of housing, but housing is one of his specialties, and he's been around it for quite some time. So Jeb, maybe a brief intro, and then we can, start talking about a little stuff in policy.
Yeah, sure. So thanks, Daryl. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here. So I'm Jeb Mason. I'm a partner in Mindset. which is a public policy consultancy in Washington, D.C. And prior to that, joining Mindset and getting into consulting, I was at the Treasury Department, as Daryl alluded to, working with Secretary Paulson during the last financial crisis. And so that was sort of my trial by fire introduction to housing finance policy, and have had a passion for sort of future housing finance and creating a more stable system ever since then. So glad to be here.
No, it's been great, and I think over the years, Jeb and his team have been super helpful for us and other folks out in the housing world, just in trying to press the right type of things to help with affordability and so forth. Today though, I thought would be great for all of us in the industry, and for those folks watching today at the summit, is to really focus on what might happen here with this significant change that's coming up potentially. Either a change in administration to the Biden folks, or perhaps retention of Trump and his administration. But I think in these times, it's always interesting what is or could happen between now and inauguration, regardless of who wins the election. Jeff, maybe we start there.
Sure. Yeah. So very active. It's probably unusual to have such sort of policy uncertainty right ahead of an election like this. Usually Congress has adjourned and gone home and is campaigning in the districts, but the combination of the need to confirm a new Supreme Court justice and ongoing negotiations over the COVID, what we call phase 4 package of stimulus, has kept the dialogue very active from a policy standpoint in Washington. And of course, in that COVID package, even though this crisis, like you said, is quite different than the one from 07-08, and that housing was not a central cause, certainly, of this crisis, housing still has a relevant component of concern. And so, everything from, servicing home mortgages and the COVID related forbearance that was created within the CARES Act. And of course, thinking ahead to post, forbearance, loss mitigation options and home retention options. And of course, there's very active negotiation about language that would be part of this next stimulus that would address the renter side, and so provide meaningful renter assistance, and to be paired with probably an eviction moratorium, so that people aren't being kicked out of their homes in the middle of this pandemic. So it's very active. I don't know that we'll get a bill before the election. I'm sort of skeptical that we will, but this could easily carry into what we'll call the lame duck session after the election. I think irrespective of who wins come election day. Yeah. So then between November 3rd and January 20, there definitely should hopefully be some action on this, and benefit, I think, all of us in the housing world. We're happy today in terms of not being directly impacted, other than the things you mentioned. Of course, folks are having challenges making payments and forbearance and all the rest. But the transactional side, lenders are closing refinances hand over fist, and agents are super busy with the lack of inventory, and folks looking to change their lifestyles, looking at bigger homes and such. But I think we all get concerned about what you mentioned in terms of the rental assistance programs and the future of home ownership. So when you look at the administrations, each side, tell us a little bit about your insights on what you expect to happen if the Trump administration continues, and then we can talk about what would potentially be different than that with the Biden administration. Yeah, I mean, a lot. Look, obviously, if the Trump administration continues, if President Trump wins, and especially if Congress more or less stays in the same configuration as it is now, with the House controlled by Democrats and the Republicans controlling the Senate, it's not profound to say that it'll probably be much more of the same. Of course, it's more complicated than that. There'll be a whole new agenda. There'll be a whole new set of things that they're trying to accomplish in the next 4 years as an administration. But one of the certain commonalities that we'll see, I think, for either administration is that they're both going to still be contending with the COVID-related crisis, and so that obviously has the stuff on the healthcare side, vaccines and such. But there's economic consequences too, to the fact that people are having to be more socially distant, that you're having to adopt your
professional life to that for those workers that can, and there are some workers that obviously can't. I mean, the nature of their jobs don't allow for that, and so a lot of concern for those people. The potential rising unemployment, or more permanent unemployment, I should say, since it's already risen quite a bit, and what we can do to sort of bridge the gap until we have effective testing and vaccine regime that allows people to sort of return to something we probably closer approximate normal.
Right, right. Yeah, someday maybe, right? Well, we're all hopeful for some pretty dramatic changes, and it sounds like, things are in the works on that end of things. But sorry, you're going to say?
Well, as I say, I mean, some of the other things that are very active here, just even before year end, I should say, what I'd call administrative housing finance reform. There's some, monumental rulemakings that are out there right now that I think will have a profound effect on the shape of, housing finance markets for years to come. I mean, one of them is the ATRQM rule at CFPB. I think we'll probably see them and finalize that before year end. We'll also see, FHFA has a enterprise capital rule out, which will impact the agency conforming market and its, shape and scope. And I think we'll see that finalized before year end. There's also a lot of, I think, kinetic activity at FHFA, just generally moving down the road towards eventually ending the conservatorships for Fannie and Freddie. And so the enterprise capital is one key component of that, but it's not the only key component of that. I think we'll probably see something from FHFA later this year, on what they're describing as their roadmap for ending the conservatorships. It's possible you'll see amendments to the preferred stock purchase agreements, which are what we used to call the keep well agreements, that where Treasury and taxpayers guarantee that Fannie and Freddie remain solvent in sort of all environments, and for which I think they'll ultimately have to pay some sort of ongoing fee for that guarantee. It's possible that I think it's fair to say that the Trump team, who's committed to a course of eventually bringing the conservatorships to an end, is trying to move down that path as quickly as they can. I think they prefer to have more time in a second administration to complete that work in a tidy way. There's some discussion and possibility that they may accelerate some aspects of that if they're leaving office. So just because I think they want to be able to complete it, or at least put the enterprises on a path which is difficult to reverse, and it sort of sets the course for the enterprises, to eventually end the conservatorships probably a couple of years from now.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. I mean, they've been that's been on the agenda for quite some time now. So I know you've been very active on that side. What do you think? What potential changes do you see happening if the Biden administration does, come in here in January 2021?
Well, look, I think they, like the current administration, will be facing a lot of the same COVID-related pressures, and there'll be a housing component to that. I think that they will be more strongly inclined to stimulus than the current administration and maybe Republicans in the Senate are. But they'll have to, the final shape of that probably won't be too wildly different than some of the things that are already being discussed in negotiations between the chambers and between the administration and Democrats in Congress. I think that you will probably, one of the main differences you'll see is I think there's probably in the tension between risk taking and housing finance policy and access. I mean, you probably see the current administration a little more focused on taxpayer risk and concerns that the MIF, for instance, at FHA is going to face some real stress in the future, probably as a result of COVID and the backlog. I don't think we'll see that show up probably in the actuarial report that they do this fall, because that's not the way the sort of accounting works. But there's palpable concern about that. I suspect you'll see, I think this administration believes in the countercyclical role for FHA and for the enterprises. But you'll probably see an incoming Biden administration, should there be one, focus even more on that countercyclical role, probably have a little more tolerance for risk taking in order to help support the economy and support access to home ownership. I think one of the things that you'll see a new administration really focused on, of course, is trying to bridge the home ownership gap, especially the racial home ownership gap. And so, I think for companies, innovative companies like Trio, this is actually a really interesting opportunity and moment, and that I think the real we tried once before to expand home ownership through simply beating out the underwriting box, and that ended in disaster. And we've seen that movie already. And I think I'm happy to say, still remember those lessons. But I think there's a real, where the opportunity is going to come is really for people to roll up their sleeves and develop and work on sort of product development side. And Trio's innovation and technology, of course, can play a meaningful role. But I think just product design and you've obviously excelled at that. I think unoptioned leases can really be a key part of that equation to help people, bridge people from rentership to ownership, and do that in a sustainable and responsible way. I know, Daryl, I've said this many times. I think Trio is a little bit of a unicorn in that you have this rare opportunity with a product like that to actually decrease risk to the MIF at FHA and taxpayers, while still expanding home ownership opportunities for Americans, helping people get into the neighborhoods and the homes that they want, and sort of demonstrate their ability to afford a mortgage and to develop a little home equity too in the process. And so I think that, but there are other opportunities too, I think, in product development. I mean, shared appreciation mortgages and other things. So I think the moment is right for industry to really roll up their sleeves and think about, what are those products that exist today, and maybe they're still on the drawing board, and how do we put together a practical plan to put them in place and make the policy changes that might be necessary in some cases to really be able to expand those. I think that's going to be a real opportunity, amidst the firefighting of the COVID crisis. I think there'll be a lot of focus there too.
Hey, one question before we wrap up here, and again, thanks so much for your time, is, on the Biden administration transition, I mean, do you anticipate, some of the same players that were there from the Obama administration side on the housing policy? Do you see some of those players coming back? I mean, it seems as if, we saw a really rough, usually you see a pretty rough transition when a new administration comes in. Now, Biden's, of course, going to have a new administration, but some of the folks maybe, they've, been there before, done some of that. What do you see the difference there? Do you see some of that or not?
Yeah, look, I'm cautiously optimistic that a transition in this case will be a lot smoother, say, than several of the more recent presidential transitions we've seen. Obviously, President Bush faced a unique circumstance when he came in because of the election controversy and the shortness of their transition, because it took a lot of time to sort out the recount in Florida. After that, I think President Bush and Congress recognized that this is a challenging and maybe risky proposition for the country. And so they started the process of transition planning much sooner in the cycle. But you had then Obama follow, who was, of course, a creature of Washington, but only recently a creature of Washington. So a lot of newness to that sort of transition process, I would say. I would say equally new for President Trump's transition, who brought a very new cast of characters to Washington. Was not a creature of Washington, very much ran as an outsider, and his campaign and his transition, I think, reflected a lot of that. That's not to say he didn't have some insiders guiding him through that process. He certainly did. But Biden, by contrast, is spent his entire career in Washington, has a strong network of people. He was vice president in the last Democratic administration. So, I very much expect a lot of the familiar cast of characters to come in, especially in the housing finance world, which is a pretty, close-knit community, as you know. But there'll be some new people too, I think. And I think in particular, you're going to see an emphasis on diversity like you've never seen before in an administration. Biden is committed to that on the campaign trail, and the focus on racial and social justice right now, I think, puts that much more impetus behind it. So, and so there'll be I think you'll see that reflected in his choices and key jobs, whether it's FHA or HUD or CFPB or Treasury or the Fed or the White House and DPC or NEC. So it'll be a mix of very familiar names and some new names too.
No, that's great. Hey, Jeb, thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Thanks for your input. Super insightful. It's great for our group to be able to have some of your thoughts as we go into this fall season. We're just a couple weeks away, and so I guess from our our side and your side, I guess the message to everyone is make sure you vote and make your voice counted. And, we'll see what happens with the administration and go forward with our programs as best we can and keep fighting for housing.
Thank you, Daryl. Glad to have been here and appreciate the relationship and look forward to talking again soon.
All right. Thanks.
All right, take care.